Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside Healthcare. As always, we have a great program for you. We have exciting new heart research to tell you about that could be a real game changer in America's battle against high cholesterol. Also on this program, are you among the millions of Minnesotans, rather thousands of Minnesotans, who can't hear quite as well as you had in the past? We'll be talking with a medical specialist on the latest treatments for hearing loss. Plus, emotional wellness might be just what your doctor ordered during this stressful holiday time. So we begin with heart research on a brand new class of cholesterol-fighting drugs. Here, take a look. And we're very pleased to have with us Dr. Les Forgaush. He's a cardiologist with Health East. You just saw him in the video briefly there. And then you're also involved with some of this national research on some exciting new cholesterol drug-fighting drugs. How are these, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
So how are these drugs different than anything that we currently have on the market, like statin medications?
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. The medications we have out now for cholesterol control, the number one in the country are called the statins. And for those people who are on them may know of them as Lipitor, for instance, which is Torvastatin, Crestor, which is Rosuvastatin, basically anything ending in the word statin. And what those drugs do is they actually help us lower our cholesterol by preventing us or helping us not make cholesterol. They interfere with cholesterol production in our bodies. The statins have been around since 1983, been the standard of care. Numerous studies worldwide looking at millions of patients have shown that statins can prevent heart attacks, prevent strokes. But yet, despite that, people still are having heart attacks and strokes worldwide. So there's a whole new paradigm shift. Well, if the statins prevent us from making cholesterol, but let's say we continue to make cholesterol, well, it would seem what would happen if we destroyed cholesterol? So that's where this whole new class of compounds comes in. There are classic compounds that help us destroy cholesterol within our bodies, which is a natural process we're doing anyway. It just helps accelerate that destruction of the cholesterol, the bad cholesterol specifically within our bodies. Right,
that's what we're talking about, the LDL.
Correct.
LDL. So I understand that you're involved in 2 clinical trials in the national research. Maybe you can tell us about those trials and how do you decide who gets in what program and trial?
Okay, sure, I'd love to. There's the trials, there's actually 3 companies now which have come out with these new agents. And these agents, believe it or not, are an antibody. And because they're an antibody, right now they have to be injected. Future research may come out with an oral antibody, but right now the antibody is a protein, so if we swallowed it, we could potentially destroy it, so they're injectable compounds. And what the antibody does is it targets a protein in our bodies that was discovered relatively recently in 2003. This protein was shown to be associated with destruction of cholesterol, or LDL, the bad cholesterol in our body. And LDL, or the bad cholesterol, low-density lipoprotein, is what can lead to heart attacks and strokes and vascular problems. So this new molecule, or this molecule was discovered in 2003, which if it's high, it can actually raise the bad cholesterol LDL, and if it's low, it can lower the bad cholesterol or LDL.
Interesting.
And what's really interesting is that their studies were done genetics, that people who have a genetically high level of this compound ended up having more heart attacks and strokes and deaths due to heart disease, whereas patients who had low levels of this compound were found to live longer and have less heart attacks and lower cholesterol. So then enter these new agents made by 3 different companies here in the United States, these antibodies to these agents, and that's what the medications are. So we're involved in 2 trials right now. One of them is being run by a company called Amgen, and their molecule has just gotten a name. And that's a study looking at anybody who has had a stroke or a heart attack or even a vascular disease, maybe a bypass on the leg or an amputation, any time in their life. And then they would be eligible for that study. The other study, which is run by Sanofi Regeneron out of New York and France, is looking at people who have had the same events but within the last 16 weeks or so. So it's more, let's say if somebody comes and has a heart attack within the last month or two and their cholesterol is not where we want it, they would qualify for that study, which is called Odyssey. We come up with these nice mnemonic names. And then the other study is called Amgen or Fourier, anybody who's had an event within the whole life, if you will.
So if someone fits that criteria, then what happens? And how long do they participate? How does this work?
Okay. Well, what happens if it's a whole qualification process. We have to confirm that, for instance, the person has had a heart attack either by blood test confirmation or stress testing or an angiogram. And then once that's confirmed, then we look at their cholesterol. And both these studies right now, the patients need to be on an agent for cholesterol lowering, a statin, if you will. And the ones that are allowed are atorvastatin, Lipitor, Crestor, rosuvastatin.
So they stay on that while they're doing
absolutely correct.
Okay.
And they need to be not at goal. So cardiologists are a lot stricter than regular physicians. People say, well, my LDL is great at 100, and come to a cardiologist, we'll say, no, it needs to be under 70, especially if you've had an event.
Really?
So,
okay.
And they may be on the top dose of one of those other medications and not getting to goal and having recurrent events, heart attacks or strokes. So then they would qualify for the study. And what happens is we try to maximize whatever medication they're on, whichever, whether it be atorvastatin, Lipitor, Crestor, or rosuvastatin, we have to maximize that to the point they can tolerate it. And a lot of patients will say, well, I get muscle aches or cramps, or I just don't feel well on the medication. And then we have to lower the dose, because certainly the cure cannot be worse than the disease, so to speak. If they feel worse on the medication, then we would lower it to the point it's tolerated. And then, let's say their numbers aren't quite where we want them to be. The LDL is still above 70, the bad cholesterol is still above 70, then they would qualify for the study. And it's a blinded fashion. They would either get the study drug or they would get placebo dummy. They would be giving it to themselves, injectable, a little teeny needle like an insulin syringe. Mm-hmm. And they would be doing that once every 2 to 3 weeks. And we don't know what they're getting. They don't know what they're getting. And we actually don't know what their cholesterol is, because these medications have been known to lower your cholesterols to super low levels, LDLs of 30 or less, which is unheard of. Yes, exactly. So we figured that if I saw somebody come back with an LDL of 30, I would know they were on the medication. So we're blinded, which means we don't know and the patient doesn't know, but the sponsor of the company knows, and the company would then adjust the medication in the background to either get better cholesterol or higher cholesterol, whatever we may need to do, depending on the results of that.
Any idea how long the study will be going on?
The studies right now are recruiting for about 1 year to 2 years. The theory is, once again, and the reason for these studies are to prove that we know these medications lower cholesterol, we know they're safe. What we need to prove, though, is do they prevent heart attacks? And it stands to reason, the hypothesis is they will prevent heart attacks and strokes. So the theory is that within 4 years to 6 years of the study, there'll be a difference between the two groups, that the group on the drug, the active drug, versus placebo will have less events, and then the study can be stopped, and we have an endpoint, then they can go to the FDA, and FDA then can say these are good drugs and they should be released for general use.
So someone go, what, am I just being a guinea pig though? I mean, you were saying that we know that they're safe, right. But final comments on why someone should participate in a heart research?
I agree with you 100%. No, they could feel like a guinea pig. And what's interesting about that is all the medications beforehand, even aspirin for heart attacks, had to go through research. There was a large study, I don't date myself, maybe 30 some odd years ago, where aspirin was compared to placebo to prevent heart attacks. Were those patients guinea pigs? In a way they were, but right now with for instance, Lipitor or atorvastatin, it had to go through the same process. I think it's exciting. It's a total paradigm shift. Rather than preventing us from making cholesterol, we're going to destroy it quicker. The medications are safe. They've not been shown to be harmful. You get great benefits of being on the cutting edge of medical therapy, if you will, and then plus it will potentially help you plus other generations to come as these statin agents did when they were experimented with in the 1970s and 1980s.
Wow, very, very exciting. We're so pleased to have you with us today. Thank you so much for being
Thanks
with us. And if you would like to participate or get more information about this heart research, the number to call at the Healthiest Heart Research is 651-326-4448. 651-326-4448. So still ahead, emotional wellness. Could you use a dose of it right now? But up next, we'll talk about hearing loss and what you can do about it. Stay with us, everyone. Thank you.
Great.
Any questions?
No.
You know.
We're not magicians, we can't read your mind.
We need your questions, each and every kind. Will this react with my other medicine?
Hey, what are all these tests even for?
Questions are the
Welcome back to Inside Healthcare. Now we turn our attention to hearing loss. It's a disability currently untreated in about 85% of those affected. Recently, Healthiest held a health program at the Maplewood Mall about hearing loss.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. I hope you all enjoyed your walk and your morning coffee. As Lori mentioned, I'm Dr. Stephanie Lipke. I'm an audiologist with Healthiest Clinics. We have audiology at 3 different locations at Healthiest, right here in Maplewood, just up the street, as well as Woodbury, and then over in St. Paul at our Midway campus.
Dr. Lipke's program is part of a unique partnership between Healthiest and the Maplewood Mall, where once a month, doctors like Dr. Lipke are at the mall providing important health information to folks in our community. And we're very pleased to have with us now Dr. Stephanie Lipke. Thank you for being with us. So hearing loss is a hidden disability. Even those that may have it aren't even aware that they have it. Why is that? What can be done about it?
Most commonly, hearing loss is acquired, and it happens gradually over time. So we adapt, we change our habits, and we feel like we're coping well with hearing loss until oftentimes a family or friend might come and say, "Oh, you answered that question incorrectly," or "I felt like you weren't a part of our conversation at dinner tonight." And then they are prompted to come into the office to figure out what's going on.
So when should they come see an audiologist, or when should they just go to their primary care?
Yeah, it's never a bad idea to have a baseline hearing test. So there's many people that come in and say, "I'm not sure if I have a problem or not." And that's perfectly fine to see where you're at, have a baseline. Typically, people mention when they're at their physical with their doctor, "I don't know if I'm hearing quite as well as I once was," and they end up coming in to see us. But certainly we're happy to see you at any time.
So things that they could be doing to prevent hearing loss?
The most important thing to do to prevent hearing loss is to protect your hearing. So that we have a very noisy world that we live in, and you want to protect your hearing when you're even going to those concerts, mowing the lawn.
My husband has started doing that now.
Great,
Yes.
great, yeah. And so that's the best thing that you can do to prevent an acquired hearing loss from noise exposure.
So as we mentioned in the tease, that there is something you can do about it.
Sure. When individuals are diagnosed with hearing loss, they do have a hearing loss, there are options. The most common treatment for hearing loss is actually hearing aids. And I have several different types up here.
Very stylish looking.
They are, yeah. Hearing aids have developed and have improved leaps and bounds even over 5 years ago. And so they can offer excellent help for people who maybe thought a hearing aid wouldn't help them, or they didn't like how a hearing aid looked. They're very cosmetically friendly now, coming in very small styles, different color options, and they also have a lot of connectivity, which is really great. So you can use devices to connect your hearing aids to your cell phone and to your television.
Oh, that's awesome.
And things like that. So I'm finding that with some of these tools, people are accepting hearing aids much younger and are finding them so beneficial to continue to improve themselves in their careers and in their everyday lives, and they really notice the benefit.
And I thought I had read a stat that, even 1 in 5 teenagers have some slight hearing loss. Why is that? More than like a decade ago.
Yeah, we're really using iPods and MP3 players and different things a lot now, and you see kids and adults walking around with those in the ears all the time. My rule is half volume, so you don't want to exceed the half volume mark because you could be causing a change to your hearing from extended use. I hear all the time teenagers that are helping with chores and mowing the lawn, but they're also using their iPod. So they're turning their iPod up on top of the noise exposure of the lawnmower, and we are seeing some noise-induced hearing loss in that population.
So it's not only the sound, but the duration of the sound too.
Yes.
That can be damaging.
Yes.
So earlier this year, Healthies performed its first cochlear implant. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but first we're going to take a look at a brief video of the very first patient who had it done at Healthies. It was such a pleasure to meet her. She is so exciting. She's so excited to have that hearing. And so maybe for our viewers who aren't familiar, what is a cochlear implant, and who should get one or who should qualify for one?
For people who are no longer getting benefit from hearing aids, they have very poor word understanding and they're not feeling like they're doing well with devices, a cochlear implant might be the next step. There's two parts to a cochlear implant. There's an internal portion. This is the part that's put into part of the cochlea and placed in the head by a surgeon, an otolaryngologist. Dr. Service is our surgeon here at Healtheast. And then there's an external portion called a processor. This part is worn on the outside of the head, so over the ear, and it brings in the sound, processes it, sends it across the skin through a magnet connection, and then changes the sound into an electronic type of energy, which is then heard in a different way. So this is a really wonderful option for people who can't be helped with hearing aids, where their hearing loss has gotten so severe that hearing aids are not helping them anymore. And cochlear implants are available for children. The FDA has approved them for 1 year and up. So sometimes we see it in adults who have gradually lost their hearing over time. And sometimes we see it in children who are born with hearing loss and are eligible to receive a cochlear implant to restore hearing.
So if someone wants to get more information about cochlear implants, about hearing loss, about getting tested, where can they get more information?
Yeah, Healtheast does have audiology available at 3 different locations, and our telephone number is 612 232-0707. I just said that wrong. 651-232-0707. My apologies. Or find a local audiologist to visit.
Well, Dr. Stephanie Lepi, it was great to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great information. So still ahead, emotional wellness. It could be just what your doctor ordered during this time of the season. So stay with us, everyone.
I knew our phone number.
Sooner or later, it's going to hit you that you have to save for your retirement. Do you know how much you'll need? It's easy to figure out. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Welcome back to Inside Healthcare. Joining us now is Dr. David Friends. He's Medical Director of Healtheast Addiction Medicine at Healtheast, and he's here to talk about emotional wellness. What is that exactly?
Yeah, well, wellness or well-being, which is probably the better way to describe it, on the most general sense, is all the things, and all is the important word, all the things that are important to how we think about and experience our lives.
And how do you determine what is your emotional well-being?
What are the components of well-being,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
And so, starting with general well-being, you can divide it into 5 categories. One of the categories is career well-being. Another category has to do with social well-being. The third category, physical well-being. There's a financial well-being component, and then finally a community well-being component. And all these things can be fairly easily measured. Anybody can actually buy a book that gives them access to a website that allows them to measure their well-being in those domains and figure out where they're at.
And the name of the book, not that we're pushing a book here, but...
Yeah, I have no financial interest in it. Well-Being, which is published by Gallup Press, Tom Rath, R-A-T-H, is the primary author, published in 2010. Easy read, fabulous read, and their website's even better.
So how are some of the ways that you measure those various components of well-being?
Well, the first thing they have you do is they have you take a battery of questions, maybe 100 questions, to sort of benchmark where you're at in those 5 domains. And you get a well-being score. And the scores fall into 3 different categories. You can be suffering, which is the lowest category. You can be struggling, or you can be thriving. And the goal is to be thriving, both overall and then in terms of the 5 categories individually.
So once you determine what your level is of all these different areas, then what can you do
What
about
do you do?
it? Yeah.
Right. Well, let's start with career well-being. And so career well-being is defined as liking what you do every day. And so for some of us, it's paid employment. For other people who are students, that's attending school. That's their career at that point. Retirees like my parents, it might be hobbies or volunteer activities. And so if you're relatively low in those areas, you have to make some important decisions. If it's paid employment, that is your primary career, you have to look at ways to optimize your job or maybe even switch jobs.
So what about, like, especially at this time of the year, the holiday season coming up, then there seems like there's so many outside stresses. How do you keep that balance and that well-being, even depending on where you are in the different levels as well?
Right, and so that website also gives you access to something called the Daily Tracker. And what it presents you with is 10 questions that you answer preferably every morning that causes you to reflect on yesterday. And you can look at how you're doing day by day and make more real-time decisions as to how to change your life.
And what would be some of those things that you can do to change your life?
Well, physical well-being, I think, really suffers during the holiday because you're off your routine in many cases. And so the 3 forms of energy or fuel sources we have often suffer. And those 3 sources of fuel are sleep, which gets screwed up around the holiday, eating, which definitely gets screwed up.
And eating right, too.
And eating right, exactly. We eat too much and the composition's wrong. And then finally exercise. And so paying close attention to our fuel sources and making sure that we're getting adequate amounts of each of those fuels.
And in the teas, I was saying it might be what the doctor ordered, but typically your doctor is not going to ask you, how's your well-being today when you go see them?
And this is the
Him
problem.
or her.
This is really the problem with healthcare. Historically, we focused on disease. And our idea of wellness is absence of disease. And consumers are saying, you know what, that's not good enough. And that's why all this retail health exists. I mean, you can go to every street corner, there's yoga studios, which is great. And so they have all these things that aren't particularly well connected to healthcare. And so I think you're going to see in the future that healthcare is going to pay more attention to well-being rather than just narrowly on disease and try to help people optimize those things that have been outside the purview of traditional medicine.
And you typically, with the mental health and addiction clinic at St. Joe's Hospital, you typically work with patients that may have addictions and things like
Right.
that. But this is something that everyone
Everybody should be doing it. And the funny thing is doctors, again, have focused on like blood pressure reduction or making sure your mammogram's up to date. And those things are really important.
Yep, they always ask those questions.
Yeah, they're super duper important things. But really what patients care about is how do I feel right now? And if I don't feel right now, what are you going to do about it? And in many cases, medicine hasn't had an answer for that. But we have to have an answer, because the funny thing about patients is they keep coming back. They keep coming back and saying something's not right, and if you don't have an answer, you know.
Well, it seems like emotional well-being is so basic too. If you're not feeling well in all those different areas that you talked about, it's going to have a physical effect on you. It's going to
Right.
translate into some physical illness.
Right, and so physical well-being, just to look at that one component of well-being and the fuel sources, we live in a real toxic culture right now where we're not doing basically anything right. We're not living the way we were designed. And so I like to focus on sleep with patients. Your mother told you 8 hours a night, right? But you're never doing it. The average American sleeps less than 7 hours per night. And even though we don't think it's harming us, it is. It harms us physically, emotionally, performance-wise, stuff like that. And so really studying yourself with the aid of tools like the website I mentioned and getting your sleep above 8 hours for sure, vitally important. The other thing is we just don't live the way we were designed. The brain is designed to perceive sunlight in the morning, and that tells us to be awake. And then when it gets dark at night, you're supposed to be sleeping. But none of us do that. You know, we get up at 5 in the morning when it's still dark, we drive to work in the dark, we sit in dark offices under fluorescent lights. So I like energy lights. It's another thing I recommend to help people get a boost of energy in the winter.
Any other tips or advice on how to boost that emotional wellness, well-being? especially during this time of the year?
Well, surprisingly, we think about gifting during the holiday, so financial well-being is one of the components of well-being. And studies have demonstrated acquiring wealth doesn't really meaningfully contribute to our well-being. It's actually investing in experiences. So instead of buying things for ourselves, invest in memories. So vacations, dinners, use your money for those things instead of material goods. And then if you have to buy material goods, research would suggest that buying things for other people, giving the material goods to other people is much better for well-being than buying material goods for ourselves.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And then what about gratitude? How does that fit into all of this?
Yeah, I think that's the same sort of thing. There's a great YouTube video actually on gratitude that just went up in the last 2 weeks. And the feeling, the popular feeling is that when you're happy, then you'll be grateful. And the presenter said it's absolutely opposite. You will be happy when you're grateful. And so he said, stop, look, and listen. So stop in the moment, look about you, and be grateful for something, and then proceed, with your life. And you can do that infinitely, every day, many times, to be grateful for just the smallest little things.
Yeah, I think I had read a number of places too. They were saying a good thing to do either at the end of your day, what are you grateful for that particular day, or maybe first thing in the morning, what are you grateful for?
Well, I think the Wellbeing website, which I mentioned, prompts you to do that. There's journal entry as well as the questions that are answered. And in the journal, you can journal about the things that you're grateful for.
So final comments about emotional well-being, and if they want more information, where can they get that?
The two sources that I recommend are Wellbeing, the book by Tom Rath, and he also has a new book published this year, and the title is sort of catchy. It's Eat, Move, Sleep, talking about those 3 energy sources. And so those are easy reads that give you stuff that you can immediately implement. And
if they wanted to reach you, is there some way that they can
Very easy to reach
you?
me. I have a website. It's www.davidfriends.com. And I've compiled a lot of material out of my website under a Wellbeing tab. It's right on the front end of the website. There's a little Wellbeing button. You push the Wellbeing button, and all the stuff on Wellbeing is out there.
Well, awesome information, especially during this time of the year. I think everyone can use a good dose of emotional well-being. So thank you so much for being with us, Dr.
My pleasure to be here. Yeah.
And have a great holiday.
Thanks.
Thanks, and we'd like to thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us next time on Inside Healthcare. We'll see you then, everyone.
Inside Healthcare. For more information, visit stjohnshospital-mn.org or call 651-326-7800.